My dad laughed when I said I was quitting my job. "You're throwing your life away," he said. I didn't respond. Last night he texted me. "Please explain how you did this." He said it with his back turned, staring out the kitchen window like the world was some stubborn machine he'd been greasing for 40 years. "You're throwing your life away," he muttered. Not shouted. Not begged. Just stated it. Like it was fact. Like gravity or taxes or how the Cubs always lose in October. I didn't say anything back. I didn't trust myself to speak. There was too much heat behind my teeth, too much of that tight, acid rage I'd swallowed for years while nodding politely through every Thanksgiving lecture about real work and men who keep their heads down. So I just stood there, my resignation letter folded in the back pocket of my khakis, and looked at a man who never once asked me if I liked the job he helped me chase. My name's Drew. 31 years old. At the time, I was 4 years deep into a cushy tech consulting role at a firm where everyone wore Patagonia vests and talked in war metaphors. Crush the quarter. Deploy this like it's Normandy. The money was good. The hours weren't. But the real killer? The silence. That brutal, buzzing kind that fills up your chest when you're surrounded by success and still feel like you're suffocating. The first sign of trouble didn't come with a breakdown. It came with a feeling. An empty one. I remember waking up one morning, brushing my teeth, and staring at my own face like it belonged to someone else. Same toothbrush. Same gray button-down. Same train. Same spreadsheet. But something was wrong. I was disappearing. It wasn't a midlife crisis. I wasn't impulsively leasing a Harley or booking a retreat in Bali. It was worse. It was clarity. And once it hit, it didn't let go. I was making $140,000 a year to solve problems that didn't matter for companies I didn't care about. I kept telling myself it was stability. That I was building something. But what? A house I didn't have time to live in. A life that looked great in LinkedIn updates but felt like wearing someone else's clothes? Then one night, after another late client call that ended in a round of fake laughter and vague promises, I sat in front of my laptop and opened a document titled Project Side Fire. It was a stupid name. But the idea wasn't. It was a game. A tactical, single-player indie title I'd been dreaming about since college. Not for clients. Not for money. For me. That was the spark. The fuel came later, after months of code, design tweaks, voiceover auditions, sleepless nights, and eating microwaved noodles next to a dusty whiteboard covered in Post-its. I worked on it in secret, stealing hours from sleep, skipping out on happy hours, ignoring the voice in my head that said, "You can't." Until one day I could. And I did. The day I quit, I thought my dad might actually get angry, yell, throw something, storm out. But he didn't. He just shook his head, slow and solemn, like he was mourning a version of me he thought he understood. "You're throwing your life away," he said again. I didn't respond. I just walked out the front door, got into my dented Camry, and started driving towards something that didn't exist yet. Something I couldn't explain, but needed to build anyway. The first real trouble showed up 6 months after I quit. I was sitting on the floor of my studio apartment, knees drawn up, laptop overheating on a cardboard box I was using as a desk, staring at my bank account and realizing I had less than 2 months of runway left. Rent, groceries, Unity engine fees, some contract artwork, all of it added up faster than I'd expected. I'd underestimated what bootstrapping really meant. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping well. And I definitely wasn't living the indie game developer fantasy I'd imagined that first night when I opened up Project Side Fire. The fantasy had a sunlit loft with hardwood floors and maybe a dog. The reality was leftover pad thai 3 nights in a row and praying my Wi-Fi wouldn't crap out during uploads. No one was calling. Not recruiters. Not publishers. Not even my old friends from the office. My phone, once a constant stream of group chats and Slack pings, had turned into a cold brick that mostly buzzed from spam calls and promotional texts. The silence got heavy. Real heavy. And my dad? Radio silent. After our conversation in the kitchen, I didn't hear from him. Not on my birthday. Not at Christmas. Not even when I texted a photo of the early alpha build with the caption, "First boss fight coded today." No thumbs up emoji. No. "Proud of you, son." Just blue ticks. Read. Ignored. I knew he thought this was just a phase. That I'd run out of money, come crawling back in a suit, ask for my old job, and promise I'd never chase fairy tales again. But I wasn't going back. Even when it got bad, and it did get bad, I kept moving forward. Because somewhere in the middle of the mess, I started seeing glimpses. Comments on dev forums. A streamer who played the early demo and actually liked it. A Reddit thread where someone called it surprisingly deep. It wasn't validation yet, but it was kindling. And when you're trying to build a fire out of nothing but scraps and spite, kindling means everything. Then came the email. I'd submitted a trailer, shaky, clunky, held together with duct tape and hope, to an indie game festival. I didn't expect anything. I was just checking the box, another shot in the dark. But that morning, buried between a notification from my utility provider and an ad for protein bars, was the subject line that made me freeze. Your game has been selected. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds before it sank in. I had a booth. A demo slot. A real shot at showing the thing I'd built, this wild, weird, tactical game with no publisher and a shoestring budget, to actual people. It wasn't money. It wasn't stability. But it was momentum. And sometimes, that's more powerful than either. The indie showcase was in Austin, middle of July, 103 degrees outside, and I was sweating through a borrowed polo shirt and a badge that said, "Developer." Like I hadn't been sleeping on a futon 2 weeks ago. My booth was nothing fancy. A folding table, a rented monitor, a printout of the game's logo I'd designed at 2 a.m. with a free trial of Photoshop. But people came. Not many at first, just curious passers-by, YouTubers looking for content, a guy in a Pikachu hoodie who played the demo for 40 minutes straight and gave me the first real feedback that didn't start with meh. Then it happened. A small crowd gathered. Someone tweeted a clip. Then another. One of the minor influencers, a guy named Danny who had 500,000 subs on YouTube, played my demo and said it was like XCOM had a panic attack in a good way. I didn't even know what that meant, but he tagged me, and overnight my follower count doubled. And then, somewhere between that rush and the rush to get back home, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in almost a year. Dad. It wasn't a call. Just a text. Saw your game. Didn't know it was a real thing. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry. Not happy. Just frozen. But I didn't answer. It wasn't time yet. Instead, I kept grinding. The weeks after the expo were a blur. I got a small feature in a gaming newsletter. A few YouTubers started streaming the alpha. The demo crashed at least 3 times on camera, but somehow the audience loved it even more. Raw, they said. Honest. I called it barely functional. But hey, whatever works. Then the call came. A real call this time. From an angel investor in Seattle who said, "Hey, I've been watching your stuff. It's weird, but people love it. How do you feel about bringing someone in to help you scale?" I didn't even realize I'd stood up until I heard my chair hit the floor behind me. I flew to Seattle the next week. Left the futon. Left the ramen. Sat in a real office with glass walls and espresso machines I didn't know how to use. The deal wasn't huge, low 6 figures, but it was oxygen. It meant real artists. Real marketers. A tiny, scrappy team of 3 others who believed in what I was doing enough to leave their stable gigs and join a guy who once coded boss fights in his boxers. When I signed the deal, I opened my phone and read that old message again. Didn't know it was a real thing. This time I answered. Just one sentence. It is now. And then I put the phone down and got to work. Because the climb was far from over. If there was a moment that felt like the edge of something, the razor-thin line between chasing a dream and watching it collapse, it was 6 months into scaling the team. Money moves fast when you're building. Salaries. software licenses, marketing. We were burning through our seed funding like firewood in January. The game was better, beautiful now, but it was big. Too big for a team of 4. We needed to finish it. And we needed to do it before the bank balance hit 0. I remember sitting in a shared co-working space at 2:13 a.m., staring at the projected burn rate on a whiteboard I hadn't updated in a week, thinking, do I lay someone off, or do I sell my car? That car, man, it was stupid. Black Mustang GT, fully loaded. The kind of car I used to keep pictures of in a folder labeled someday. Back when I was stuck in finance, watching my dreams turn to spreadsheets. I bought it right after the deal closed. Not as a flex, but as a promise. That I wasn't going back. Now I was about to sell it to keep the lights on. I called Marcus, our lead dev, and told him I might not make payroll if something didn't give. He didn't even flinch. I can go part-time if you need, he said. I'll freelance on the side. We're not letting this crash. That night I listed the Mustang. Sold it to a guy who barely asked my name. Just handed me a check, took the keys, and drove off with a piece of my past. I walked home. Yeah. I walked. In the rain. No Uber. No umbrella. Just that feeling, the one you get when you're betting everything on a vision no one else can see yet. A week later, one of our devlogs went viral. It was just a behind-the-scenes look at our team, me explaining the combat system, Marcus talking about dynamic AI paths, our artist, Lydia, showing off a rework level that made people's jaws drop. We didn't even try to hype it. Just dropped it online like a pebble in a pond. It was shared 12,000 times in a day. Then came the calls. A podcast feature. A profile piece in a gaming mag I used to read in college. A Twitch streamer with over 1 million followers offered to play the beta live. And we got another offer, this time from a publisher. Mid-tier, solid reputation, real marketing budget. The kind of partner who could finish what we started. We signed. And just like that, the tide turned. The first week after signing with the publisher felt like that moment when you stop drowning long enough to take a breath, and realize you're still in the middle of the ocean. They were good people. Gave us space, respected the vision. But they had expectations. Deadlines. Milestones. Suddenly we weren't just building for us anymore, we were on someone else's clock. I moved into a better place. A proper apartment with a real kitchen, a desk that wasn't made from stacked moving boxes, and a view that looked out over the city instead of a back alley dumpster. For the first time in years, I had a bedroom door that closed and central air that actually worked. I took a picture of the view. Sent it to my dad. No reply. The team worked like animals, sprints, patches, rewrites, late-night bugs that made you question everything you ever believed about collision detection. We added voice acting. A soundtrack. A rich, moody story arc that players in the Discord server started theorizing about before we even finished writing it. But for every win, there were stumbles. A patch went live that corrupted save files. Our lead artist burned out and disappeared for 2 weeks. No word, no warning. The publisher freaked. I panicked. And for the first time since I'd started this thing, I seriously considered quitting. It hit me during a launch call. The kind where no one has their camera on because we're all half dead from crunch and caffeinated to the point of buzzing. I was sitting there in a hoodie, 3 days unshaven, listening to someone explain how we were pushing launch by 2 months, and I just drifted. I looked at the corner of my screen. My name. My game. The project that started as a joke title in a .doc file. And I thought, this is it. This is what growing looks like. Not fire, not confetti. Just dragging the thing across the finish line, inch by inch, even when it bleeds you dry. We made it. The game launched on a Thursday. We hit publish, and just sat there in silence for 5 minutes like astronauts who'd landed and were waiting to see if Earth was still there. The first review hit at 12:43 p.m. 9 out of 10. Then another. And another. Streamers picked it up. YouTubers broke it down. One guy cried on camera during a story mission that we almost cut because I thought it was too weird. By midnight, we'd sold 70,000 copies. That weekend, we hit the front page of Steam. I didn't party. I didn't tweet. I didn't do anything, really. I just opened my dad's old message again. Didn't know it was a real thing. And stared at it. Still no response to my last text. But I had the feeling that was about to change. It came at 2:12 a.m., like most things that change your life do. Just a simple vibration on my nightstand, one line glowing through the dark. Please explain how you did this. I sat up, heart pounding, not like I'd seen a ghost, but like something deeper had shifted. A tectonic plate, finally giving way. It was my dad. The man who once said chasing this was a joke, who told me I was throwing everything away for nothing. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because part of me never thought I'd get the chance. I didn't write him back right away. Not because I was angry, though a year ago, I might have been. I just wanted to get it right. To explain it without bitterness, without ego. Just the truth. A quiet kind of truth. The next evening, I sat down, opened a new message, and typed. I stopped trying to impress people who didn't understand me. I worked like my life depended on it, because it kind of did. I failed a lot. But I kept showing up. Even when no one else did. That's how I did it. I hovered over send for a few seconds. Then I hit it. He didn't reply that night. Not the next day either. But I didn't need him to. The words weren't for him, not really. They were for me. Because I knew now, I never needed his permission. I just needed to stop asking for it. 3 weeks later, I stood barefoot on the balcony of my new place, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, all glass and skyline and silence. The kind of place I used to walk past in my old life, eyes tilted upward, thinking someday. Someday had come. The game, Sci-Fire, was now in its third update. We were already working on a prequel. Merch was selling out. A Japanese localization team had reached out. And the day before, a studio I once interned for, back when I used to fetch coffee and nod in meetings I barely understood, had sent me a job offer. I declined. Politely. With a smile. Marcus had moved into a bigger place too. Lydia was working on an art book tied to the game, and Danny, the YouTuber who first put us on the map, had asked to invest in our next project. It felt like we had built something that didn't just work, it resonated. And through all of it, I kept expecting to feel done. Like there'd be a moment where the void was filled, where all the sacrifice had finally balanced out the doubt. But that moment never came. Because success, real success, didn't feel like champagne and celebrations. It felt like clarity. I wasn't trying to be rich. I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong anymore. I was just trying to keep doing the thing that finally made me feel real. The Mustang was long gone, but sometimes I caught myself browsing listings. Not to buy, just to remember the version of me who used to sit in traffic with the windows down, dreaming of this life like it was a movie he wasn't allowed to audition for. Now, I was writing the script. I still hadn't spoken to my dad since the text. Not in person, not over the phone. But one night, out of nowhere, I found myself dialing his number. He picked up on the second ring, like he'd been holding the phone already. "Hey," I said. He was quiet. Then, "Hey." And just like that, the silence between us started to crack, not with apologies, not with tears. But with something quieter. Something maybe stronger. Respect. He came over a week later. I hadn't invited him. He didn't ask. He just texted. "In your area? Mind if I stop by?" I almost said no. Part of me didn't want him to see the place. The polished floors, the clean white counters, the glass desk with dual monitors that didn't flicker every time you opened a browser tab. It felt like too much. Like the proof had become too sharp to hand over without it cutting us both. But I said yes. He arrived in his usual work boots, jeans, and a windbreaker that hadn't changed since I was in high school. Still wore his watch on the inside of his wrist, still walked with that slow, heavy gait like every step was a quiet decision. He stood in the entryway longer than he should have, eyes drifting across the living room, up to the high ceiling, over to the wall where I'd hung the framed first print of Sidefire's game cover. Nice place, he said. I nodded. Thanks. He walked to the window, looked out at the city. The silence stretched. You remember that summer I made you come help me on the site? He asked suddenly. I smiled, hadn't thought about it in years. I was 16, resentful, sunburnt, and totally unqualified to help build the framing on a house he was working. I dropped a beam on my foot, swore like hell, and got chewed out by the foreman. You hated it, he said, almost laughing now. Didn't say a word to me the whole ride home. I shrugged. Thought you were punishing me. He turned and looked at me, expression unreadable. I wasn't. I just didn't know how else to show you what real work looked like. That line sat between us for a moment, heavy, not cruel, just honest. I thought that job you had in finance was safe, he continued. Something to build on. Something solid. I didn't understand why anyone would walk away from that. I know, I said quietly. But I wasn't building anything that mattered. Not to me. He didn't respond right away. Just nodded slow. Then he motioned to the framed game cover. That yours? He asked, even though he knew. Yeah. He stepped closer, squinted a little. Never thought I'd say this, he muttered. But it's pretty damn cool. We both chuckled. A soft, strange laugh. The kind that comes when old resentments start to lose their shape. He didn't stay long. Asked about parking validation on his way out, grumbled about meter prices. But right before he reached the elevator, he turned back and said, You proved me wrong. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Because I wasn't trying to prove him wrong anymore. I was trying to live right.